At minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit, the night didn't just steal my breath, it tried to erase me. When my own son slammed the door and left me in the snow, I thought that was the end, until I found an abandoned train car and a storm that would change everything. If this story pulls at you even a little, pause for a second and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. Welcome back to your ultimate destination for gripping revenge stories, family betrayals, shocking betrayals, and emotional justice. Subscribe now and join a community and tell us where you're watching from. Turn on the notification bell for our next story. Are you ready to witness the ultimate payback? Let's get started. My name is ZAHA, and I'm 68 years old. Before this night ends, I will learn how close a man can come to disappearing without anyone noticing. Before the story truly begins, let me ask you something. Have you ever reached an age where you thought life would finally slow down, only to find it still demanding more from you? If so, leave a comment. I read them. At minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit, the cold doesn't feel like weather. It feels like judgment. It doesn't rush you. It waits. It seeps. It crawls into places memory forgot existed, behind the knees, inside the ears, beneath old scars that haven't ached in years. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill the body, but interrogates it. I stood on the porch of the house I once called home, my breath fogging the air in front of me like a fading signal. The porch light buzzed overhead, flickering, as if even it was unsure whether I still belonged there. Behind the door stood my son. Behind him stood warmth, light, noise, life continuing without me. "Dad," he had said, arms crossed, eyes avoiding mine. "You can't stay here anymore. Not tonight. Not until spring. Just anymore." The word landed heavier than the cold. I searched his face for hesitation, for doubt, for the boy who once climbed onto my shoulders to see fireworks. I found none. Only resolve. Polished, adult, rehearsed resolve. "I told you," he added, softer now, as if volume could soften meaning. "You need to figure something else out. Something else." At 68, with arthritis in my hands and a pension that barely survived inflation, something else sounded suspiciously like nowhere. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because pride is sometimes the last thing an old man has left. The door closed. The porch light clicked off. And just like that, I became a man standing alone in the coldest night of the year. The silence after. The snow hadn't started yet, but the air was sharp, brittle, ready. The street was quiet in that way only winter can manage. No birds, no cars, just the faint hiss of wind moving between houses like a whisper that didn't want to be heard. I adjusted the collar of my coat. It was an old one. The zipper stuck. The lining had thinned near the elbows. My wife used to nag me to replace it. "ZAHA," she'd say, tugging at the sleeve. "This thing is older than our marriage." She'd been gone 3 years now. Cancer doesn't care how prepared you are. Neither, I was learning, does family. I stepped off the porch slowly, my boots crunching against snow that squealed under my weight. Each step sounded too loud, like I was disturbing something sacred. Or final. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. How a father becomes a burden. It hadn't always been like this. For most of my life, I was the one people leaned on. I worked 35 years at the mill, missed birthdays, missed vacations, missed entire seasons of my children's lives so they could have stability. I believed in that trade-off. I still do. When my wife fell ill, I learned hospitals the way other men learn fishing spots. I memorized corridors, schedules, the exact hum of machines that beeped reassurance until they didn't. After she passed, the house got quieter. Not immediately. Grief is loud at first, but gradually, like a radio fading into static. The bills didn't quiet down, though. When the house finally went, my son said, "Come stay with us. Just for a while." Just for a while stretched into months. At first, I tried to make myself useful. I fixed things. Watched my grandson after school. Cooked when I could. Stayed out of the way when I couldn't. But usefulness has an expiration date when you're old. Soon, it was "you're always here." Then you don't help enough. Then you make things tense. I learned how to shrink. How to speak only when spoken to. How to sit at the edge of rooms like a coat no one wanted to hang. Tonight was simply the moment the unspoken became spoken. The walk. The cold met me fully once I reached the sidewalk. The wind picked up, slicing between houses, dragging needles of ice across my cheeks. My beard stiffened almost instantly, frost forming in the creases I hadn't noticed before. I didn't have a plan. I had direction. Away. I walked past houses glowing with yellow light. Families gathered around dinners, televisions murmuring comfort into the walls. I smelled soup through one open window, laughter through another. Each sound felt borrowed. The farther I walked, the quieter it got. Streetlights thinned. The wind grew louder. My phone buzzed once, low battery, then died completely, the screen black and unresponsive. I slipped it into my pocket anyway. Old habits die hard. When fear arrives calmly, fear doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives like a calculation. My fingers were going numb. Not painfully, just absent. I flexed them, slapped them together, felt pins and needles bloom and fade. My knees complained. My breath came out shallow, sharp. That's when the thought came. People die like this. Not dramatically. Not with witnesses. They sit down because they're tired. I promised myself I wouldn't sit. The train yard. The wind shifted near the old industrial district, opening up a stretch of exposed rail and half-buried gravel. The train yard had been abandoned for years, ever since the factory shut down and took half the town's jobs with it. That included mine. The metal skeletons of freight cars loomed through the darkness, dusted with snow, forgotten but stubborn. And there, half hidden behind a drift, was one that looked intact. A train car. I don't believe in miracles, but I believe in shelter. I forced the frozen door open with both hands, the metal shrieking in protest. The sound echoed through the yard, then disappeared into the wind. Inside, it smelled like rust, oil, and time. But it was out of the wind. I climbed in and slammed the door shut, my hands shaking so badly I dropped one glove. I didn't bother picking it up. I slid down against the wall, knees to my chest, breath coming in ragged clouds. For the first time that night, the cold hesitated. I laughed then, short, cracked, and ugly. This is it, I whispered to no one. This is what I get. The storm arrives. The storm didn't knock. It hit. Snow slammed against the train car in heavy waves, the metal shuddering as if struck by something alive. The wind screamed, a high, furious sound that made my chest tighten. The temperature dropped again. I could feel it in my teeth. My coat wasn't enough. My boots weren't enough. And the train car, solid as it looked, felt suddenly thin. I pressed my palm against the wall and felt the vibration of the storm. It reminded me of standing beside the machines at the mill, how something powerful could destroy you without even noticing. I thought of my son. Warm, safe, certain. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity, a promise in the dark. I survived that first hour by pacing, by stamping my feet, by talking out loud just to hear a human voice, even if it was my own. At some point, with the storm howling and the train car rocking like it might tip, a thought settled into my chest, heavy and undeniable. If I live through this, things will change. Not revenge, not violence. Something deeper, something he would never forget. I wasn't done being a father, but I was done being invisible. The storm didn't care that I had found shelter. That was the first thing I understood. The train car groaned as another wave of wind slammed into it, metal popping and contracting like something alive and in pain. Snow packed itself into every seam, every weakness, hissing as it found ways inside. The air grew sharper by the minute, each breath scraping my throat raw. I stopped pacing. Movement had kept me alive, but it was costing me too. My legs trembled now, not just from the cold, but from exhaustion. 68 years old is not built for this kind of night. I leaned against the wall and slid down slowly, careful not to collapse all at once. The metal seeped cold through my coat immediately. My back stiffened, muscles locking in protest. No, I muttered. Not yet. I forced myself back up. The cold is clever. It doesn't demand. It suggests. Rest. Just for a minute. I'd buried friends who listened to that voice. My hands were the first to go properly. They no longer felt numb. They felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. When I tried to clench my fists, they moved slowly, reluctantly, as if the message had to travel too far to arrive on time. I slapped them against my thighs. Hard. Once. Twice. The sound echoed inside the car, dull and unimpressive. I checked my feet next. Stamped them. No sharp pain, just pressure. That scared me. Pain is information. No pain means silence. I laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. Still here, I told myself. You're still here. My breath rattled in my chest, fogging the dim interior. Frost began to form along the inside walls now, feathering outward like pale veins. The train car was losing the fight. And so was I. The mind does strange things when the body starts to shut down. Time bent. I was no longer just a man in a train car. I was also 25 again, holding my son for the first time. He'd been so small, red-faced, furious at the world, fists clenched like he already knew it would demand things from him. "I've got you," I'd whispered then. "I've got you." The memory hit me hard enough that my knees buckled. "I did," I said aloud now, my voice cracking. "I kept you safe." The storm answered with another violent udar against the wall. I thought of birthdays I missed, of nights I came home too tired to talk, of all the love I assumed he understood without me ever saying it clearly. Regret is a luxury the cold doesn't allow for long. I needed insulation. Anything. Sitting still was no longer an option. I forced myself to search the car, dragging my hands along the walls, feeling for shapes in the darkness. My fingers brushed against something loose, fabric, stiff with age. A tarp. It was filthy, torn at the corners, but it was something. I pulled it down, shaking snow and rust flakes loose, then wrapped it around my shoulders, tucking it into my coat. The difference was immediate. Not warmth, but less loss. I scanned the floor again and spotted debris in the far corner. Old wooden pallets, half-rotted but dry enough. Wood doesn't steal heat the way metal does. I dragged one closer and sat carefully, keeping my back off the wall. Small victories matter when the margin is death. That's when I heard it. Not the wind. Something else. A low, distant rumble that cut through the storm's scream. At first, I thought it was thunder, impossible in this weather, but it came again, closer this time. A horn. A train horn. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." Trains hadn't used these tracks in years. Everyone knew that. The yard was dead. Forgotten. And yet, the sound came again. Long, hollow. Real. Hope is dangerous in the cold. It makes you reckless. I stumbled to my feet and banged on the wall, shouting, my voice thin and useless against the storm. "Hey, I'm here." The horn sounded once more, then faded. Silence followed. The kind that breaks something inside you. I slid back down onto the pallet, my chest heaving. My hands shook uncontrollably now, deep shudders that rattled my teeth. That was it then. The universe reminding me not to expect mercy. I checked my watch. The glass was fogged, the hands barely visible. 2:17 a.m. I didn't know how long I'd been inside the car. Hours, maybe. Or minutes stretched thin by fear. I knew one thing with brutal certainty. If I stayed here until morning, I wouldn't see it. The storm was intensifying. Snow was drifting inside through gaps I couldn't seal. The temperature was still dropping. The train car was a coffin with better marketing. I had a choice. Stay and wait for the cold to finish its work. Or move. Movement meant exposure. Wind. Open space. But it also meant possibility. I laughed again, breathless. "So this is it," I said. "This is where you decide." I thought of my grandson. His laugh. The way he'd wave without looking back, trusting I was still there. I thought of my son, standing behind that door, convinced this was necessary. Clean. Logical. If I died tonight, it would be quiet. Easy to explain. An accident. A sad story. And he would live the rest of his life believing he'd done what he had to do. Something inside me hardened. "No," I said. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just completely. As if offended by my refusal, the storm surged. A violent gust ripped part of the tarp from my shoulders, yanking it toward the door. Snow exploded inside, blinding me, freezing my face instantly. I turned away too slowly. The cold hit my eyes like needles. I screamed, short, raw, and stumbled back, clutching my face. Panic flared, hot and useless. "Focus," I growled. "Focus." I forced my eyes open. Everything was white and spinning, but I could still see shapes. Still move. Barely. The message was clear. The storm was done waiting. I wrapped the tarp tighter, grabbed the glove I dropped earlier, and forced the train car door open. The wind hit me like a wall. Instantly, my breath was stolen, ripped from my lungs. Snow filled my mouth, my nose, my eyes. The world reduced itself to sound and pain. I leaned into it, and took one step. Then another. The train yard was unrecognizable now. Tracks buried, shapes erased. Direction became a guess. Instinct. I followed the faint outline of the rails, counting steps, whispering numbers to stay conscious. 10, 20, 30. My legs burned. My lungs screamed. My heart pounded like it was trying to escape my chest. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't stop. If you're still with me, pause for a moment and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where stopping felt easier than continuing? I want to hear that. I don't remember falling. I remember being down. Snow pressed against my cheek. The world tilted sideways. My body refused commands now, arms and legs heavy as stone. This was it, the moment everyone talks about later. The moment you could still get up. Or not. I closed my eyes. Warmth bloomed suddenly in my chest, spreading outward. A false warmth. A lie. I smiled. Then, faintly, through the storm, a voice. Hello. It cut through the fog like a blade. My eyes snapped open. I tried to answer. Nothing came out but a broken sound. The voice came again, closer. Light flickered through the snow. I forced one arm to move. Lifted it an inch. Dropped it. Again. The light shifted. Stopped. Footsteps crunched toward me. A face loomed above mine, distorted by snow and urgency. Sir, stay with me. Hands grabbed my shoulders. Strong hands. Warm gloves. I tried to speak. Failed. That's it, the voice said. I've got you. I've got you. The words hit me like memory. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the train car. Distant now. Small. No longer a tomb. Just a place I survived. I came back to myself in pieces. First, there was sound. Muffled. Distant. Like the world was happening underwater. A steady beeping. The low murmur of voices that rose and fell without meaning. Somewhere nearby, something hissed rhythmically. Then came sensation. Heat. Not the false, drifting warmth from before. This was sharp, invasive, almost painful. It pressed against my skin from every direction, crawling back into places the cold had evacuated. I tried to move. My body answered with nothing. Panic flared, hot and immediate, but it was weak, like everything else. I forced my eyes open. White. Too white. The ceiling hovered above me, dotted with fluorescent lights. The smell was unmistakable. Antiseptic. Plastic. Something faintly metallic. Hospitals have a way of announcing themselves before you fully understand where you are. A face appeared at the edge of my vision. Mr. ZAHA, a woman asked gently. Can you hear me? I tried to nod. My neck barely twitched. That's okay, she said quickly, leaning closer. Don't try to move yet. You're safe. You're in the hospital. Safe. The word landed strangely, like it belonged to another man. They told me later what hypothermia does when it doesn't quite win. How the body shuts doors to save the house. Fingers first. Toes. Ears. How blood retreats inward, abandoning the extremities like outposts that can't be defended. I lost 2 toenails. Most of the feeling in my left index finger. My ears blistered badly, the skin angry and raw beneath bandages. They said I was lucky. Lucky. A word people use when they don't know what else to call survival. I lay there wrapped in warming blankets, for lines taped to my arms, listening to machines do the breathing and pacing my body couldn't yet manage on its own. Every few minutes, a nurse came by to check my vitals, shine a light in my eyes, ask my name. ZAHA. I croaked the first time. My throat burned. And your age? 68. She smiled. Welcome back. It was a social worker who asked the question. She pulled up a chair beside my bed, clipboard balanced on her knee, eyes kind but focused in a way that suggested she'd seen this before. Mr. ZAHA, she said. Do you have any family we can contact? The room seemed to shrink. Yes, I said after a moment. My son. She waited. I stared at the ceiling, counting the small cracks in the paint, each one a place my eyes could hide. He knows I'm here? I asked. Her pause was answer enough. No, she said gently. We found your ID in your coat. The paramedic on scene didn't have next of kin information. On scene. The words echoed. He kicked me out, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. That night, her pen stopped moving. I see, she said quietly. I closed my eyes. Do you want us to call him? She asked. That was the real question. I thought of the porch light clicking off. The door locking. The warmth he chose not to share. Yes, I said finally. Call him. Not because I wanted comfort. Because consequences require witnesses. They called him that afternoon. I didn't see his face when he answered. I only heard the change in the room. The way the nurse's voice softened, then sharpened with surprise. Yes, "This is the hospital," she said. "Your father was admitted early this morning." Silence followed, long enough that even she seemed uncertain. "Yes," she continued. "Severe hypothermia. He was found during the storm." Another pause. "I understand," she said, more firmly now. "But he's asking for you." I turned my head slightly, stared at the door. I didn't know what I felt. I knew what I didn't feel. Relief. Hospitals are loud during the day and haunted at night. After visiting hours ended, after the nurses dimmed the lights and the hallway quieted, memory crept in. Not the sharp kind. The slow, heavy kind that settles in your chest and refuses to move. I remembered teaching my son how to ride a bike. The way he fell again and again, teeth clenched, refusing to cry. "Try one more time," I'd said. Just one. He'd made it halfway down the street before crashing into a hedge, laughing through scraped knees. I remembered his graduation. The weight of pride sitting beside disappointment. I'd missed the ceremony because of a shift I couldn't trade. I remembered the first time he called me old man. I remembered the last time he looked at me like I mattered. Memory is cruel that way. It brings receipts. He came the next morning. I heard him before I saw him. His voice, low and tense, speaking to the nurse outside my room. "Yes, I'm his son." "No, I didn't know." "Yes, I understand." Footsteps. Then he stood in the doorway. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker, just diminished. Like certainty had been drained from him overnight. "Dad," he said. Just that. I didn't answer right away. He stepped inside slowly, hands shoved into his coat pockets, eyes scanning the machines, the bandages, the 4-line disappearing into my arm. "I didn't," he started, then stopped. "I didn't know it was that bad." "That bad," I repeated quietly. He flinched. "I thought you'd go to a shelter," he said. "Or call someone." "I did call someone," I said. "Eventually." He swallowed. "They said you almost didn't make it." I looked at him then. Really looked. "Almost," I agreed. We sat in silence. Hospitals are good at that, forcing people to sit with things they'd rather rush past. "I didn't think," he said finally. "No," I replied. "You didn't." He ran a hand through his hair. "Things have been hard. The house is small. The stress. The weather was colder," I said. He stopped talking. "I wasn't asking to be comfortable," I continued. "I was asking not to freeze." His eyes filled. He looked away quickly. "I messed up," he whispered. I let the words hang there. People expect forgiveness to arrive quickly, like a reflex. But forgiveness isn't reflex, it's a decision. And decisions take time. The doctor arrived mid-conversation, brisk and composed. "Mr. ZAHA," he said, flipping through my chart. "You're stable, but we need to be realistic." I nodded. "You'll recover," he continued, "but not overnight. There's nerve damage. Some loss of mobility. You'll need rehab. Possibly assisted living for a while." My son stiffened. "Assisted living?" he asked. "Yes," the doctor said calmly. "At least until he regains strength. And he cannot be discharged to an unsafe environment." The word unsafe hung in the air. The doctor glanced between us, then continued. "Do you have arrangements in mind?" My son opened his mouth. Closed it. "I will figure something out," he said. The doctor nodded. Sooner rather than later. When he left, the room felt heavier. My son sat down at last. "I didn't think it would come to this," he said. "It already did," I replied. He looked at me then, really looked, and something shifted. Fear maybe, or guilt, or the realization that consequences don't disappear just because you look away. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. I exhaled slowly. "That's the first honest thing you've said," I told him. He nodded, eyes downcast. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Of failing. Of not being enough." I almost laughed. "Welcome to being a father," I said softly. He looked up, startled. "I was scared too," I continued. "Every day? I just didn't let it make me cruel." The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. Truth cuts on its own. That afternoon, a nurse helped me sit up for the first time. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, fired down my legs, pins and needles screaming through my feet. I gripped the rails, teeth clenched, refusing to cry out. "Easy," she said. Slowly. My son watched, helpless. "I should have never," he started. "No," I said, breathless. "You should watch." He froze. "Watch what happens when someone survives what you dismissed," I said. The nurse pretended not to hear. When I finally settled back against the pillows, drenched in sweat, my son's face was pale. "I didn't know," he said again. "I know," I replied. "That's the problem. News travels fast in small places. By the third day, people started visiting. Old coworkers. A neighbor I barely remembered. A man from the mill who'd lost 3 fingers in a press accident and still shook my hand like it meant something. They brought coffee. Stories. Quiet outrage. "You're lucky they found you," one said. "Yes," I agreed. They asked questions my son couldn't avoid hearing. Why was he outside? Didn't he have family? Who lets a man his age? My son stood at the back of the room, shoulders tight, absorbing every word. Consequences don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper until you can't escape them. On the 5th day, my son came alone. He pulled the chair close to my bed and sat without speaking. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about what kind of man I want my son to remember." I waited. "I don't want him to learn that people are disposable," he continued. "That love has conditions." I nodded once. "That lesson sticks," I said. He looked at his hands. "I want to do this right," he said. "Whatever that takes." I studied him. "This isn't about doing it right," I said. "It's about doing it differently." He met my eyes. "I'm listening." We talked for a long time. About boundaries. About respect. About what help actually looks like, and what it doesn't. "I won't live where I'm resented," I said. "And I won't be silent to make others comfortable." He nodded. "And I won't pretend this didn't happen," I added. "You don't get to forget this." He swallowed hard. "I won't," he said. "I promise." Promises are easy. Change is not. The social worker returned that evening with paperwork. "There's a rehabilitation facility with availability," she said. "Warm. Structured. Temporary." Temporary. I looked at my son. He nodded. "I'll handle it," he said. "All of it." I studied his face. "You're not doing this for me," I said. "You're doing this so you can live with yourself." He didn't deny it. "That's a start," I said. "If you've stayed with this story this far, let me ask you something. Have you ever faced a moment where accountability hurt more than loss? Share it in the comments. Your voice matters. That night, alone again, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the machines. I was alive, changed, scarred, awake. Outside, the storm had passed. The world moved on. Inside me, something had shifted permanently. I had survived the cold. Now my son would have to survive the truth. The day they moved me to rehabilitation, the sky was painfully blue. Not the soft blue of summer mornings or hopeful beginnings. This was the sharp, indifferent blue of winter after a storm has taken everything it wanted and left the rest standing. Sunlight bounced off the snow in blinding sheets, forcing the world to squint. I sat in a wheelchair by the hospital window, wrapped in blankets, watching nurses come and go with practiced efficiency. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Heavy, unresponsive, buzzing with pins and needles that never quite settled into sensation. "Transport will be here in 10 minutes, a nurse said, cheerful, professional. 10 minutes. Time had started behaving strangely since the night of the storm. Hours stretched. Days collapsed. The past felt closer than the present. My son stood near the door, coat on, hands clasped together like he was bracing himself for impact. "You ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. He nodded, then hesitated. "I took the day off," he added. "I'll follow the ambulance." I looked at him. "That's new," I said. He exhaled. "So am I. Ambulances have a smell, clean, sterile, but layered with urgency." As they lifted me onto the stretcher and slid me inside, I stared at the ceiling, counting the small holes in the acoustic paneling. My body jolted with each movement, pain blooming and receding like a tide. The doors closed. For a moment, there was silence. Then the engine started. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of my son through the rear window, standing alone in the parking lot, watching the ambulance carry me somewhere he hadn't planned for. I wondered if he remembered the night he'd watched me walk away. I wondered if he felt the difference now. The rehabilitation center sat on the edge of town, a low building surrounded by snowbanks taller than the fence. Inside, it was warm. Too warm at first, the heat making my skin prickle uncomfortably. They settled me into a room with one window and 2 beds. The other bed was empty. "Physical therapy starts tomorrow morning," a woman in scrubs explained. "Slow and steady. We don't rush recovery here." I smiled faintly. "Good," I said. "I've rushed enough things in my life." She paused, then smiled back. Sleep didn't come easily. The mattress was unfamiliar. The sounds were wrong. No storm, no machines, just the quiet hum of heating vents and distant footsteps in the hallway. My body ached in ways it hadn't before, deep aches that spoke of damage and healing fighting for space. Sometime after midnight, I heard the door open softly. I didn't turn my head. "I know you're awake," my son said quietly. I waited. He pulled the chair close and sat down. The silence stretched, thick but not hostile. "I keep replaying it," he said finally. "That night." I said nothing. "I keep thinking, if I'd waited just one more day. If I'd driven you somewhere. If I'd checked the weather." His voice broke. "I didn't even check the weather." I turned my head then. "What do you see when you replay it?" I asked. He swallowed. "I see you standing there. And me closing the door." I nodded. "That's good," I said. "Don't lose that image." He flinched. "You don't get to forget," I continued. "Not because I want you to suffer. Because forgetting is how people repeat things." Tears slid down his face, silent and unguarded. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was wrong." I watched him carefully. Apologies are easy to say when consequences are loud. "I know," I said. He looked up, desperate. Is that enough?" I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "But it's the beginning." Physical therapy is humiliation disguised as progress. On the first morning, they helped me stand between parallel bars. My legs shook violently, muscles screaming in protest, nerves firing off misaligned signals that made balance feel impossible. "Shift your weight," the therapist said gently. I tried. Pain exploded through my feet, sharp and electric. I gasped, sweat breaking out across my forehead. "Good," she said. "That's good. Hold it." I held on with everything I had. Across the room, through the glass wall, I saw my son watching. He didn't look away. He came every day after work. Sometimes he talked. Sometimes he just sat. Sometimes he watched me struggle through exercises that reduced me to trembling silence. I didn't hide it. If he was going to be part of my life again, he would see all of it. The weakness, the frustration, the moments when I wanted to give up. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal session, I threw my water cup across the room. It shattered against the wall, plastic clattering to the floor. "I hate this," I snapped. "I hate what this did to me." The therapist calmly cleaned it up. My son stood frozen. "I did this," he said quietly. I looked at him. "Yes," I said. "You did." The truth landed between us, heavy and undeniable. He nodded, jaw clenched. "Then I'll carry it." Word didn't fade. People remembered. At the grocery store, at school pickup, at work, questions followed him like a shadow. "How's your dad?" That was some storm. Lucky they found him. Lucky. Each question was a reminder. Each reminder was a weight. One evening, he came in later than usual, eyes tired, shoulders slumped. "People talk," he said. "They always do," I replied. "They look at me differently." "Good," I said. "They should." He didn't argue. It happened on a Saturday. He arrived with his wife this time, my daughter-in-law, quiet and careful, eyes full of concern she didn't know how to express. "We need to talk," he said. I gestured to the chair. He took a breath. "We want you to come back. To the house. When you're discharged." The room went very still. "No," I said. He blinked. "No, I won't go back to that," I said calmly. "Not like before." His wife shifted uncomfortably. "We've made changes," he said quickly. "Cleared space. Set boundaries." This isn't about space," I interrupted. "It's about respect." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I won't live somewhere my presence is tolerated instead of wanted," I continued. "And I won't live somewhere where safety is conditional." Silence. "What do you want?" he asked finally. I met his eyes. "I want acknowledgement," I said. "Not just from you. From everyone." His wife frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means we don't pretend this was a misunderstanding," I said. "We don't soften it. We don't erase it." He swallowed. "You want me to tell people?" "Yes," I said. "I want you to own it." The room filled with tension, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, he nodded. "I will," he said. He started with family. Phone calls. Hard conversations. Long pauses. Then friends. Then, without telling me first, he posted. Not excuses. Not explanations. The truth. "My father nearly died in the cold because I made a decision I can't take back. I failed him. I'm working to do better." The response was immediate. Support. Criticism. Silence. Accountability is lonely. That night, he came to my room, eyes red, voice raw. "I did it," he said. I studied him. "And?" I asked. "And it hurt," he said. "More than anything." I nodded. "That's how you know it mattered," I said. Progress came slowly after that. 1 step without the bars. 2 steps with a walker. A full lap around the therapy room without stopping. Each milestone felt small until you added them together. One afternoon, the therapist stepped back and smiled. "You're stronger than you think," she said. I thought of the train car, the storm, the night that tried to erase me. "I know," I said. My son watched. Pride and humility tangled together in his expression. 2 weeks later, the social worker returned. "You're approaching discharge," she said. "We need to finalize arrangements." I looked at my son. "I've been looking at independent senior housing," he said quickly. "Close by? Safe? Warm?" I raised an eyebrow. "Independent," I repeated. "Yes," he said. "Your space. Your rules. I'll help, but you're not dependent." I considered him carefully. "This isn't guilt talking?" I asked. He shook his head. "It's respect." I nodded once. "Then we can talk," I said. On my final night at the rehab center, I sat by the window, watching snow fall softly under the streetlights. Gentle this time. Harmless. My son sat beside me. "I used to think strength meant control," he said quietly. "Being right. Being efficient. And now?" I asked. "And now I think it means responsibility," he said. "For the people you affect." I smiled faintly. "That lesson cost us both," I said. "Yes," he agreed. "But I won't waste it." I looked out at the snow. Neither would I. If this story has stayed with you, take a moment and leave a comment. Accountability, forgiveness, survival. These stories matter because they happen every day. The next morning, I stood on my own 2 feet by the door. Not steady, not painless, but standing. My son watched, eyes shining. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "This time I am." The first night in my new apartment was too quiet. Not the hollow quiet of abandonment or the brittle silence of fear, but a different kind. A careful quiet. One that waited to see what I would do with it. The place was small but solid. 1 bedroom. A living room with a wide window that faced east. A kitchen where everything worked without persuasion. The radiator hissed softly, steady and dependable, like a promise it intended to keep. Warmth filled the rooms evenly, not the aggressive blast of forced air, but a patient heat that seeped into walls and floors. I stood just inside the door for a long moment, coat still on, breathing it in. Warmth without guilt. My son set my bag down gently by the couch. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I've been colder." He smiled faintly, then caught himself, like he wasn't sure he'd earned the right to smile yet. "Call me if you need anything," he said. "Anything." "I will," I replied. And I meant it. He hesitated at the door. "I'm proud of you," he said. I looked at him. "For surviving?" I asked. "For standing," he said. "For not letting this disappear." I considered that. "Good," I said. "So am I." When the door closed behind him, it didn't feel like a rejection. It felt like a boundary. Recovery doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, in the way you don't need to brace before standing, in the way you stop counting steps, in the way pain becomes background noise instead of a constant negotiation. The first morning, I woke before dawn out of habit. The room was dim, pale light leaking in around the edges of the curtains. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and waited for the familiar protest. It came, but softer now. Progress. I made coffee slowly, deliberately. The smell filled the apartment, rich and grounding. I sat at the small table and drank it while watching the sky lighten. I was still here. That realization never got old. People didn't forget. At the grocery store, conversations paused when I entered, then resumed, carefully. Some people smiled too brightly. Others avoided my eyes. A few came right up to me. "Good to see you on your feet," one said. "Glad you made it," said another. I nodded, thanked them, kept moving. Survival changes how people look at you. It strips away assumptions, leaves something raw in their place. At the checkout counter, the cashier, young, nervous, leaned forward. "My grandpa," she said quietly, "he lives with us." I didn't realize how close things can get. I met her eyes. "Pay attention," I said gently. "That's all it takes." She nodded, swallowing hard. He didn't stop. That surprised me the most. He checked in without hovering. Came by once a week for dinner, never unannounced. Always asked. Always waited for the answer. He listened now. Not just to me, but to the spaces between words. To what wasn't said. One evening, as we sat eating soup he'd burned slightly, he cleared his throat. "I talked to my son," he said. I looked up. He asked why you don't live with us anymore, he continued. I told him the truth. I set my spoon down. And I asked. He asked if he could still see you, my son said quickly. I told him, of course, that you're not gone, just independent. I nodded. And what did he say? He said, my son smiled sadly. Good. Grandpa shouldn't be cold. Something tightened in my chest. Children understand more than we think, I said. Yes, my son agreed. They do. Forgiveness didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces. In the way I stopped rehearsing that night in my head before sleep. In the way anger loosened its grip on my chest. In the way I could look at my son without seeing the door closing behind him. One afternoon, as we walked slowly through the park, he spoke without looking at me. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. I stopped. He stopped too. I already have, I said. He turned, stunned. But I didn't say I forgot. I continued. Forgiveness isn't erasure. It's release. His eyes filled. I carry it, he said. I know, I replied. That's why I can set it down. We stood there in the cold, gentle cold this time, breathing in sync. I started volunteering at the community center twice a week. Nothing dramatic. Just fixing chairs, helping set up tables, teaching a few younger men how to repair things instead of replacing them. Where'd you learn that? One asked as I tightened a bolt. From breaking enough things, I said. They laughed. It felt good to be useful again, not because I needed validation, but because I chose it. One afternoon, a man about my age sat beside me, staring at the floor. My daughter says I'm a burden, he muttered. I didn't rush. I slept in a train car once, I said quietly. He looked up. I met his eyes. You're not a burden, I said. You're a responsibility. There's a difference. His shoulders sagged. Feels heavy, he admitted. Yes, I agreed. But heavy things can still be held. It came months later. We were sitting in my living room, the window open to spring air, when my son spoke. I need to say something, he said. I waited. I'm sorry, he said. Not for what happened to you. For what I became before it happened. That was different. I forgot who I wanted to be, he continued. And I used you to justify it. I studied him. That's the apology that counts, I said. He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for months. The following winter came quietly. Forecasts warned of another deep freeze. Not as brutal, but enough to make people remember. The night it arrived, my son called. You warm, he asked. Yes, I said. You sure? I smiled. Yes, I repeated. Very sure. There was a pause. I won't ever do that again, he said. I know, I replied. Outside my window, snow fell gently, harmless and beautiful. One afternoon, I drove past the train yard. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. The memory had softened, not dulled, but placed where it belonged. Not as a wound, but as a marker. Here is where I learned something. Here is where I survived. On my 69th birthday, my son came over early. He handed me a small box. Inside was a watch. Simple, sturdy, warm leather band. So you always know the time, he said. And so you remember, time matters. I fastened it around my wrist. I'll remember, I said. We sat together, sunlight filling the room. You know, he said quietly, that night changed me. It changed me too, I replied. He hesitated. But not all change is damage. No, I agreed. Some of it is direction. I still walk slower. My finger still tingles in the cold. I still wake early. But I no longer feel disposable. I no longer confuse endurance with love. I know now that survival is not the same as living, and that dignity, once reclaimed, changes everything. I didn't make my son pay with revenge. I made him pay with truth. And he paid it forward with change. Tonight, I sit by my window, watching lights turn on across the neighborhood. Lives continuing. Doors opening and closing, not in anger, but in rhythm. I sip tea. I breathe easily. My name is ZAHA. I am 68 years old. And the night didn't erase me. It revealed me. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.